It's my great honor and privilege then to be able to introduce our morning keynote speaker, Congressman Hansen Clarke. All right. Hansen Clarke is a native of Detroit, right? A graduate from Cornell University with a Bachelor in Fine Arts. He didn't come here, but we'll forgive him for not getting his JD at Wayne State. He did go to Georgetown University Law Center, but as soon as he got his degree, he came back and is a public servant in Michigan. And it's a real inspiration as I try to encourage space through the Keith Center to get our own students to be thinking about careers in public service. That's a choice. Right? That's an important choice that people make on how they're going to spend their valuable energies, their valuable times, their valuable skills. And Congressman Clarke has always been a public servant early in his career at the Wayne County Executive Office, served the state of Michigan in both the Michigan House and the Michigan Senate, and is currently serving as well as a congressman in the United States Senate. And I can't think of a better advocate for the city of Detroit or somebody to welcome us for a keynote speaker than Congressman Hansen Clarke.
Well, everyone, it's an honor for me to be here at Wayne State University. I want to thank the Journal of Law and Society for holding this symposium. It's very important. In fact, it's very timely. If I look at just within the last 24 hours, I was spending my time buttonholing members of the House of Representatives and one U.S. Senator from a state outside of Michigan on how we can get financial emergency relief through Congress that'll help the city of Detroit avoid bankruptcy and avoid state takeover. And, you know, surprisingly, I shouldn't say surprisingly, but no member of Congress, I only spoke to those that are outside of Michigan, objected to supporting the city of Detroit. Everyone understood the importance of our city, of our region in the national and global economy. The only concern was the practical political messaging of it. How are we going to push this through so people don't think of it as a bailout? Okay, so any event, this is a timely symposium. If we think about why we're in a financial crisis, it's because a lot of people and businesses left the city over decades. And the causes are multiple. Years ago it was race, it's a housing crisis. But if you ask people over the past few decades, the recent years, on why they left Detroit, usually they'll give you one or all of the three following answers. Number one, safety. Number two, schools. Number three, high cost of living here compared to the services that we get delivered. And it appeared that crime was increasing, that more and more of our students were dropping out of schools, that city taxes were going higher while the services were plummeting. It was a course that was not sustainable. And those residents and businesses that chose not to put up with it, they left the city. So, in some regards, the state responded by taking over the Detroit public schools over the past 10 years. In my opinion, many decisions were made by people who were not elected, who were appointed, decisions that may have made good financial sense according to the books of the Detroit schools by closing down schools. But those schools, when they were closed down, resulted in parents leaving the school system, ultimately leaving the city, and along with them their tax dollars. So many of the decisions that may have been made for financial reasons ended up destroying viable neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. And that's my unbiased view. So, and that was supposed to be funny, so you guys are very serious. I guess there must be all law review people here. Okay, all right, so that's my fine arts background, you know, the humor, the levity, that type of thing. But all right, so I'll keep it right to the point. You know, the state takeover of Detroit schools, in my opinion, it failed. But then when you looked at the situation in the city, where people's attitudes, it appeared that the folks in Detroit allowed this kind of mismanagement of their money. Let me give you an example. I was out campaigning for election a decade ago, and I was talking to one of my buddies I grew up with. He got into an argument with me because he thought that I was wrong in opposing the mayor living in a taxpayer-paid mansion. And so I said, look, man, you want your tax dollars to be used to have the mayor being set up in the Manoogian mansion, but yet you're in foreclosure? Can you see how ridiculous that is? No, he couldn't. He said somehow I was reducing the importance of the office of mayor and that the mayor should live in a mansion. So that type of attitude, I believe, is contributed to this financial crisis that we're in. So the question is this: why do people have that kind of attitude? How do we change it? Can we do it through public policy? I'm going to have to give you a personal example on why I think people feel that way, and I think it's a cultural issue. And I'll say it, and you can say that that's politically incorrect, but when I look at myself, I'm born and raised in the city of Detroit. My mother's African American. My dad was from South Asia. He was born in India, now Bangladesh. They both died when I was younger. So by the time I was 19, I had no parents. I had no brothers and sisters. I had no grandparents. And I made decisions that were not in my best interest. The scholarship I had to college, I decided to let that go, and I dropped out of college, and I ended up losing the income that I had, the car that I had, ended up on public assistance at 23. Even though my mother sacrificed to send me to a prep school, to see that I went to college, I accepted the fact that I was getting food stamps and I didn't have a job. I remember I had a lady friend and we went to the supermarket together and we bought all of our groceries with food stamps. Back then you actually had the actual coupons. I mean, little did I really think about the direction I was going in my life. Now, ultimately what happened was the Department of Social Services, they cut me off of food stamps. So I didn't have anything to survive on, and I was a desperate man. And things ended up working in my favor. I was able to get a job that was created through an act of Congress, a training program that assigned me to Kettering High School to work with young people who were skipping class. Now that gave me a little paycheck, but it gave me something much more. It gave me a mission now to actually help these other kids. That's what inspired me to go back to school and to get involved in public service. And that actually shaped my politics. I ultimately knew as a member of Congress I could do something to help people because this act of Congress provided me with an opportunity. But the point is this, is that many times those of us in the city of Detroit, in spite of all of the opportunities that are available to us, we view ourselves as victims, that we have no power over our circumstances. I understand that. I experienced that. But it leads to financial chaos when the collective culture of the voting public don't believe they have power or control over their government. That's been the problem. What's the answer? Number one, people have got to take responsibility. That they're taxpayers. And that the only way that we can have good schools, we've got to demand that the school board deliver us good schools. The only way we can have safe streets is that we demand the city council and the mayor work for us. Now, some of you who live in the suburbs, you're saying, well, isn't that basic civics? Of course it is. You understand that. The people that didn't want to put up with it in Detroit left the city for the suburbs. Many of the folks who are here right now accept it as the way it is. Now, also in large part, we as elected officials and as policymakers bear enormous responsibility. We need to lead by example. We need to inspire the public. And I'm not talking about delivering a great speech, but by how we work, how we be with people. We've got to be focused totally on serving them. The public then will get the understanding that politicians are here in office not to be served by us, but to deliver good schools and safe streets and train people for those business opportunities that are out here. I will say this, and this is very politically incorrect. but as someone who was a black man with a South Asian dad, many times, those of us that come from communities that feel disenfranchised, we feel that the only way that we can enjoy success is through others. So we put people in office so that they can live well at our expense. I know that sounds a little bit bizarre, but that kind of attitude even goes on in my father's country of Bangladesh. When people feel that they've been shut out, that they have no control over their lives, over their destiny, they put a mayor in and have that mayor live well, and they can vicariously live through that person. I understand what that's about. You see, that's what we have to change, that collective culture. And the way that we do that is by individually inspiring people to let them know that they have the power to control their government. What elected officials need to do is start working on what the public needs. I'll give you an example. I'm in Congress. I'm a freshman in an institution that's governed by seniority. I'm a Democrat in a chamber of the House controlled by Republicans. The House Appropriations Committee decides to cut food stamp spending, but not just any food stamp spending, but funding for low-income mothers to purchase fresh fruits and vegetables from farmers markets. Well, that's what we need our kids to eat, not junk food, but vegetables that are fresh. And we want to support our local agriculture, businesses, and Eastern Market. So I realized this is ridiculous. It'll actually undercut public health. It'll hurt economic growth in this state, and it could put Eastern Market out of business, okay, the very things that I'm trying to help promote here. So I went on the floor of the House, and I offered an amendment to restore $5 million to that program. And, you know, everyone said, you know, you don't offer that. I mean, they'll never accept it in the House. You don't have the votes, you don't have the party, you don't have the seniority. But here's what I did. I offered it based on the opportunity that those food stamps gave my mother in raising me. I said, look, let's have every child have a chance to get that same opportunity. So the Republican chair of the committee, he looked at me and he said, I'll accept your amendment while even voting on it. You see, work based on commitment, work based on a need. Another way, a key way to get the public to realize that government is there to really work for you is to inform everyone that if they really want to change the system, to reform how things are done, not only in the city but in this country, it's not through the political system many times that's so focused on political fundraising and demonizing the other party. That turns off voters, really. But what we need to do is inspire the public to create a national movement to change the system. So that's why I drafted sweeping legislation, the Student Loan Forgiveness Act of 2012, that will totally transform the way we finance education and repay student loans. And you know who I went to for support? Not the members of the House of Representatives. I went directly to the American people by asking them to sign an online petition supporting this legislation. It went viral a week ago. We now have over 400,000 signatures on board. We're on board to getting 1 million signatures. The people, the students, the graduates, the parents of this country, they will drive Congress to reform and forgive student loans in this country. That's the kind of thing that our elected officials need to do. So ultimately it's this, and I'll wrap it up. The lesson is for policymakers, yes, we're in a financial crisis. We've got to institute financial controls. My work right now in Congress to get an emergency relief package through, it's an uphill battle. The only way I know we'll be able to get it through is that I'm going to have to make concessions on restructuring decision-making in the city of Detroit on how that money is spent. But we've got to be careful not to propose more laws, not to implement laws that undercut the will and value of the people. We don't need to further separate the voters from the elected officials who are held to account to spend their money. We need to bring them together. So whatever we do, let's do this as law students and lawyers. Let's remember the principles upon which this country was founded on. Let's always look at the Declaration of Independence. Just remember, one of the main grievances we had against England is that they were imposing taxes on us without our consent. Look especially at that preamble of the Declaration of Independence, which cites that all of us are endowed by our Creator by inalienable rights of life, of liberty, of the pursuit of happiness, and that in order for those rights to be secured, we instituted government, and government only has just powers, and those powers are solely derived by the consent of the governed. So that's my message, is that this country, the city, must always be governed by the people, for the people, but most importantly, for all of the people. Thank you so much for having me here.